emerging role of the WES. Joining us to speak about that today, Art Eldred, Client Executive Systems Engineering, VARGO. Art, welcome.
Thank you, Russell. Thanks for having me today.
Art, I want to turn to the materials handling industry, talk about the state that you see it in today versus, say, 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. What do you say?
Well, I tell you, this industry is really going through an evolution, and a very, very rapid evolution. I think the evolution is being driven by the e-commerce dominance, the e-commerce market and the growth that it's having, and the effects that it's having on our supply chain. Our supply chain's really morphed over the last 5 years in looking at inventory a whole different way, as well as the order fulfillment processes around that inventory, whether we're doing fulfillment from the back end of the store, or we're trying to co-locate inventory for different channels and different processes under one roof. But the evolution used to be, in 5 years, 10 years ago, might have been this channel had this set of inventory. We opened up this new channel, it had another purpose, and it had another huge volume onto it, but a different geographic pool to it, so it opened up another distribution center in another area of the country. One might be closer to the population centers and the transportation centers around, say, retail stores. And then the e-commerce customer who's now emerged is now being driven to where are the ramps to the access to getting to overnight delivery. And the critical masses of those two went different ways 10 years ago. Now we're looking back and saying, let's pull these under one roof, let's leverage the inventory and drive our margins up. Let's stop liquidating stuff because we have it in the wrong inventory channel, and let's co-locate those and drive margin to the best possible channel we can. So this market is really emerging from a very quick shift in the way that our consumers are purchasing the products. And our supply chain has to react faster and faster and faster.
Great overview indeed. I want to turn to this acronym though that we're seeing now more and more, WES, Warehouse Execution Systems. I want you to walk us through that, and I guess the question is, in terms of automated distribution, is this the new wave or the new waveless, if you will, approach to warehouse control systems? Just what's going on here?
Absolutely. One of the things it does give you is a great ability to be flexible with inside the channels of the warehouse. We view the warehouse management systems, the folks that sit a higher in level than us, the ERP, the warehouse management systems, as the single records of inventory, the single record of order management, the single record of statistics on what is my order doing. But when we start looking at what happens on the flows underneath of those, we have gotten much more complex. The flows 10 years ago were one channel, let's fill a truck. The flow today might be, let's fill this truck, but let's fill this package. An order that used to be 1,000 items and only came 2 or 3 times a day is drastically different than an order, it's now 100,000 orders with only 1 or 2 items. So those flows are very disparate. The warehouse execution system, if we start thinking about how it has a bridging view of everything within the warehouse, looking at how pick-to-light systems are doing, how sorter utilization is, and most importantly, how are the users, the resources being people and machines interfacing together. So we see the WES as the pool that looks across the entire umbrella, can look at every piece of individual components of resources and pull work to the resource, maximizing the utilization of equipment and people.
Overarching view to the operation, quite interesting there. I want to turn to benefits of pool-based methodology versus push-based. What do you say there?
Well, this is a really interesting topic for VARGO. We've been doing this since about 1978, 1976, and we started using pool-based methodologies. We don't really focus on where the equipment is or what type of utilization of the equipment we're doing. The thing that we really want to start with is let's pull to the available resource. Manufacturing, Henry Ford, when he first invented the manufacturing line, he wasn't pushing bumpers up to the front of a line, he was pulling bumpers up to the front of the line. Well, when we go to a push-based system, where our legacy systems have been and where this industry has really gravitated towards and our solutions have been built upon, we're looking at trying to drive efficiency through mass. That sounds great when we're filling a trailer. When we are filling an e-commerce order, it feels more like we're assembling a product. Every product is a customer order that has unique qualifications to it and different parts makeups. So that feels much more like an assembly process, so it really lends itself very well to a pool-based methodology. And pulling is actually a very, very simple concept to come across. If I have a resource that's available, let's say it's a packer or something at the end of the line, and I complete a package, that's what should spark the work going back into the picking process that feeds the overarching process flow in the warehouse. A push-based methodology, which might be gated and mirrored, might say, I've released 100,000 orders, or 100,000 items, I'm sorry. let's push it to the next process down chain. Well, when that chain gets full, I stop my work. I meter the work that goes in and out. When I get a little bit of more flow, I push more work into it. That requires a lot more systems integration, it requires a lot more supervision, it requires buffers that lead to more automation costs, more space. If I simply went pool-based and said, look at the resource at the end of the chain, I complete a piece of work, let's induct another one in, I keep the process flow minimized, which reduces automation, reduces time, more importantly. As soon as I start a push and I collate all this work together, this work can't start or finish until the very first piece is started and the very last piece has completed. In a pool-based methodology, I might still have a batch of work that I'm picking to, but the difference is I'm driving efficiency through batch picking, but I've not coupled any one of those tasks together. I can pick this order completely individually of this one, or individually of this one, by pulling to a resource at the end that's available and inducting the work in the beginning.
You know, reducing cycle times is clearly a benefit I'm going to get if I've implemented a Waveless WES, but here's the question. What other benefits are likely to flow from that kind of implementation?
Great question. So one of the things that we're seeing is if you start with the process flow in entirety, and lean, if we're let me go back to lean for just a minute. Lean, if implemented in a silo, does a great thing. It really improves your productivity, it reduces waste, it reduces time, it reduces travel. But what we need to do is we need to look at the process end to end and say, how is this lean process working? If I get lean, and we've all kind of heard about the Six Sigma endeavors, we've heard about the lean processes in manufacturing, but if I look at lean end to end, it does a ton of benefits for us in the warehouse world. One, it will reduce travel. It will reduce waste and work that's being pushed up front to something in anticipation of work being done. So let's just use the example of a pallet. In a retail world, I must push a pallet up to the front end because I know I'm going to consume that piece of work over the next 2 to 3 days. So I've grabbed it for the forklift, I pulled it from reserve, put it into a forward pick location. Well, that product is occupying 4 feet of a pick face, whereas I might only consume 1 case in a given hour of a day. If I pull to the resource up front and use a lean methodology, that case now occupies 6 inches on the travel distance as opposed to 4 feet. I can really dense up my travel times. So if we start looking at where we're going to play the role here, we're going to increase the utilization of your efficiency because we're pulling to resources. We don't have ebbs and flows with waves. I can normalize the flow across sorters. I can turn sorters much faster on quicker repetition. So the order cycle time, obviously we talked about going down, but now if I turn a chute much quicker, the sorters that used to be 1,000 destinations now can be 400 or 200 destinations, and I just turn it more often, which drives my capital cost down. The other thing that's going to do is the buffer itself isn't just a cost of time, which is really an impedance to delivering to SLAs on e-commerce, but that buffer also costs money. It costs money in the sense of labor that manages the buffer, it costs money in the sense of the space that it's going to occupy, and it costs money in the sense of the actual automation or the piece of work that's actually storing that buffer. So there's a huge benefit on time, utilization, capital cost, and overall balancing resources to achieve their best.
Final question for you, Art. We've been talking about e-commerce and omni-channel. Can't have a conversation these days about fulfillment without talking about those things. But in any event, the question is, how have they driven technology and innovation in warehouse execution systems, or is it in fact the other way around? What do you say?
Oh, I have to say that the e-commerce market has driven our focus on labor to no end like it has never seen before in a warehouse. And the reason is because every touch that we're doing in an e-commerce order is magnified by the amount of items and units that are being touched to assemble that order together. Pulling a case, pulling a pallet to a trailer requires effort. Pulling that same cube of product to a bunch of e-commerce orders requires a lot more effort, a lot more labor. That assembly process is exploding our labor counts in our fulfillment centers. So the focus on any type of automation where we're reducing walk, where we're reducing hand time, where we're reducing anything that impedes accuracy, has a huge focus on this industry right now. The larger problem that's coming across is what happens when we have an e-commerce marketplace that requires only 4 or 5 days of 10 times the labor I had 4 weeks ago. That by itself, I can't get folks ramped up, trained, and on board at a productivity level in 6 days that's going to satisfy what I was doing 4 weeks ago. my expectations have to drastically change during a peak period of time as opposed to a non-peak period of time. So we look at training the workforce by going through and being decoupled in every one of those processes. The more I can get you focused on taping a box, picking a product, taking an item out of a tote and putting it into a box, the better off I am. The more I couple those processes, the more I've got to train you and the more things that you're responsible for in your task. More importantly, when I send you out to pick an item, I don't want you to know whether you're picking a single item, a multi-line item, or even a retail order. If I combine all of those into a pick process and make it simple for you as an order filler and selector in the process, I've really got a huge win. We also see this whole evolution of now the omni-channel fulfillment coming inside the four walls. It was living in the back room of stores, it's been exploding in what omni-channel fulfillment really means. But when we focus that effort inside the four walls, if I can take that retail labor that's been working hard since July all the way through the November getting product into the stores and transition them into a workforce that's now going to deliver an e-commerce order, I have a huge win because they already know my product, they know my processes, they're familiar with my equipment, and more importantly, the health and safety aspects of getting to know our end operating procedures really pay large dividends for our clients.
Well, clearly revolution taking place in fulfillment, and great oversight here, from you. I know you're busy here at the conference, Art, but you found time to speak with us. Thank you very, very much.
Very welcome. Thank you so much for having us, Russell.
Art Eldred, VARGO, speaking with us today about the emerging role of WES. Thank you for watching.